Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming. Well, thanks
Thank
for
you.
letting me do the interview. Um, cool. So I'll get right into it. The um, first thing I guess I wanted to ask is what was it that motivated you to become a teacher in the first place?
Yep.
And then how did your motivation, how's it evolved over the course of your career?
Um,
Actually, before that, how long have you been a
okay.
teacher?
I have been a teacher since 05,
Oh,
since
five? Oh,
2005.
yeah, nearly
I
20
had
years.
about 2.5 years off in the middle,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Okay.
almost getting close to 20 years from when I started. I graduated school and started engineering.
Yep.
But while I was then I deferred after a semester, and in the time that I deferred, I did some tutoring and then
Oh,
enjoyed
yeah.
that. So I hadn't thought about teaching before then, but it was in
Yeah.
that time that I'm like, actually, I really like teaching this stuff. So then I decided to, so
Yeah.
I changed my degree and then went into teaching.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a big part of it. Like I enjoy the actual teaching
Mm.
side, plus school has enough variety for it to be like continue to be fun and engaging as well.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also a good job that pays pretty well. And at this stage of life, that's also very important
That's a
as well.
increasingly
So
important motivation.
yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
like, there's obviously a multitude of factors, but
Yeah.
sometimes in life, just getting paid is important too. But I
Yeah.
do still enjoy it.
Yeah.
It can be pretty hard sometimes, so you need both of those other things. Thank you.
What do you find is the most difficult or most tedious, like
Yeah,
the bits of the job that like maybe drag you down a bit more?
yeah. I don't like marking or admin.
Yep.
Um, I can see the point with marking though, so
Yep.
that's not quite so bad.
Yeah.
Um, but it's times where you get asked to do admin heavy jobs that
Yeah.
are less important for the actual day to day, or maybe even just not very important at all, but
Right.
important to the school or important to someone else or important to the TRB or something like that.
Right.
Those sorts of things that steal time. That's probably the worst bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you, because you've got like the dot periods and such.
Mm.
Um, in terms of time. So like you've got these admin jobs that come up, and it's like, okay, I suddenly have to do all this extra stuff that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like. Do you find like how do you manage the time? Like it's okay, the admin jobs come along. That means that you have to take more of your time outside of school.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So often other things come up. I'm a bit different because I don't teach full time. I've got point 0.8 teaching load and
yeah,
I've got point 0.2 for so basically a class worth of time
yeah,
to do like teacher mentoring stuff and line up new teachers with mentors at the school.
yeah. Okay.
But then that starts a lot of the other aspects of teaching as soon as you step outside of just normal classroom
Mm.
teaching means that some weeks I will need every minute of my dot basically to
Yeah,
do some first aid almost like regarding new teachers
yeah,
and like okay they really need something or this teacher's struggling so you've got to have lots of meetings and lots of chats lots of stuff and so that might steal every minute of dot that week.
right.
Then another week I might get some of that time where I can knock off a lot of my stuff during school, but there is
Yeah,
normally much more than you can do during a day
yeah.
if you step outside of your lane at all.
Oh, right. You
So
start
a
taking
teacher
them
who
beyond what
like
you
hunkers
absolutely need.
down and has taught the same stuff for a few years in a row,
Yeah.
some of those teachers manage to get by with not much outside of school. There's still
Okay.
the marking and still some of the other stuff, but they don't do as much time, and that'd be one of the reasons why teachers are resistant to doing.
Yeah.
anything beyond their actual classroom or
Yeah.
anything that risks taking more time because they'll just
Right. And then so for you, like it ends up that even though you've got a point eight teaching load, you're still working like the full time
oh yeah.
hours.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm working still at school all of the hours plus
Yeah.
having to
Okay.
do work at home
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
mornings or the evenings or something else.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. Okay. The I guess the next thing I wanted to ask is what it is that you think teachers, like in terms of personality traits,
Mm.
what do teachers need in order to be successful?
Yeah. So I think well a lot of teachers so like you do personality tests of teachers and a lot of them end up grouped into the same sorts of areas.
Yeah.
And so most like need to be I guess many of them are people focused.
Yeah.
So to like enjoy the activity of teaching
Yeah.
and working with people
Yeah.
is like important for a lot of success and happiness
Yeah.
in the job. You so there's like sometimes the job can be hard and you just need to get it done.
Yeah.
And so personality traits that help you towards that, but then particularly for longevity, you've got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think one of the like you do need to be adaptable and flexible to certain levels,
Yeah.
and that will lead towards like greater satisfaction and greater longevity.
Yeah.
So, and then you also need to be not. I think like different studies have shown that like if teachers can come in too idealistic, so they want to do the best job. They're like it's a really big calling for them or something.
Yeah.
I've experienced that. Like they're actually teachers who risk burning out
Yeah.
within the first few years, um, because the teaching profession can take everything that you give it and more,
Yeah.
and it's a non-tangible. Like how long do you prepare for a class? Like you could spend a week preparing,
Yeah.
like for a single class,
Right.
coming up with things, doing different stuff, or you could.
So knowing
So
knowing how to when to stop and
yeah,
then
knowing when to.
stop at
Yeah,
some
that's
point.
right,
Yeah.
and knowing that you can't actually do. Like it's a profession where you actually can't do the perfect job. I mean, in
Yeah.
most professions you can't do a perfect job, but even more so, you're dealing with people. Nothing
Yeah.
always goes to plan.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's a big part of the risk as well that you see with new teachers in particularly in Christian schools. People are like, I'm called to this.
Yeah.
Then that can be a real risk factor because they want to do everything and then 4 or 5 years in they're like struggling
Yeah.
because they've been doing too much.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, um, how would you describe your teaching style compared to, I don't know, compared to others?
And compared to other teachers,
Yeah.
I guess I teach in maths and science,
Yeah.
so it is about um, there's an aspect of like cheerleader that's important from the start. Like, so you got to enthuse them about the content that they're about to learn.
Yeah.
Um, will help them to engage. Then to try to, I guess, concisely explain it, but being adaptable enough to take into account what you already know of them and, um, yeah, kind of pitch it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my
Pitch it
so
to them,
I'm
like sort of, yeah, get at the
as
level
in
that
yeah
they're at.
into like
Yeah.
give them so you've got to give them the information in some way or form.
Yeah.
I think most of my classes are fairly laid back. How would I? So I'm not a particularly strict disciplinarian in a classroom, but I think that also meant like you've got to. There are some of the non-negotiables that actually enable you to be a little bit more laid back in a classroom.
Mm.
So if you refuse to let kids talk over you while you're teaching, then sooner or later, like they'll get on board, and then life gets easier, and you can be
Yeah.
more relaxed,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
don't end up having to discipline as much, as opposed to like. So like there's this happy. You try to aim for the happy medium where you're like, not not too uptight, not too and combative, and not too easygoing that they can do what they want. Like,
Yeah.
how does that differ? So I get like people would probably describe me as fairly laid back then,
Yeah. Okay.
um, in the classroom. But I do think that like almost the cheerleading sort of thing, like that's pretty big.
Yeah.
So the more you can, so I try to work that in, like the more that you can encourage, both encourage them that what they're learning is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Which is easier to do sometimes than others, but it's generally like through showing some sort of enthusiasm for what they're learning. And then also enthusiasm for them as well, encouraging them to give it a go.
Yeah.
If you like that, that's probably one of the big things that I aim to do
Would you say
through
that
lessons. Yeah.
would you say that like developing a relationship with each student is important, like with each student individually in some sense?
I guess where you can,
Right.
like,
But it's
like
not, you don't have to have a relationship with each and every individual
Yeah.
student necessarily, but it's like you
Yeah.
do it as you can.
and you can get there. Like that's one of the reasons why. Like it helps in a number of ways, and that's why teaching at the same school for a few years. Like once you get through second or third year, that becomes a lot easier because you'll have seen a big portion of them. Plus, you'll have seen siblings and other things like that. And so then, in the end, you don't really like you don't need to personally have an understanding of everything about them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much politeness and kindness to convince them that you do actually care
Yeah.
about them and seeing them. Like, for example, making sure that you welcome them, making sure that as you see them around the school, you smile and say hello. Like things like that can actually be big game changers for a lot of kids. And school is a scary place for a lot of them, and not many people will like. They don't say hello to each other all of the time unless they're the extreme extroverted about the place. So just saying hi to them is enough to convince them that you do actually care. So then you don't, and then then you chase the opportunities that you can get to see what they're doing, show some interest, follow up, like little chats where you can. Obviously, you still got to teach them. But if it doesn't really matter and they say that they're tired, ask them why they're tired and have a chat about their week and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The non-negotiables that you mentioned, like not talking over you.
Yeah.
What other non-negotiables are there? Like, I'm very curious about that.
If they're mean to another kid, that'll get them out of the room.
Oh, okay.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Send the kid out of the room, even if it's just for a chat out, like time outside. Like that's a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
Not really a thing at Kingsway, but if they're mean to somebody else, that's a complete no go. The talking over the top is important, both respectfully and pragmatically to teach, and then being rude to me, I also wouldn't. Also wouldn't stand for.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a spectrum of being rude to me. There's like a not paying attention to me while I talk. Yeah. Like they're teenagers, you got to deal with a bit of that. But like in their words or what they say, and then so, yeah. I guess then they're the real big ones. So number one, the big one is like if they're mean to another kid, they're out of the room immediately because that like is more likely to make me. So while I'm easygoing, that's likely to make me upset very quickly. So
Yeah.
they'll get the full anger within,
Yeah.
yeah, they'll trigger me enough to be like, no, we're not having this, out of the room straight away. But
Yeah.
then other things, it's all a balance, and even
Yeah.
things like chatting or being off task, they're not as they can be negotiated depending on the kid and
Yeah.
what their needs are and how they're going and
Yeah.
everything else. Yeah.
What's so the out of the room, like you just say, okay, like sit on the
Or stand
sit
outside the
outside,
room,
yeah.
stand outside the room, I'll come talk to you in a minute, sort of thing.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
you're
so
you're
I'm
continuing the
not sending
class
them
for a bit
away,
and
and so
still
it's
yeah.
the classes
You get the
because
class
I
doing
almost never
something.
pull that. You never ever it's very rare you need to do that.
Right.
And so it's impactful in that, no, that's not somebody doesn't stay in the class if they
Yeah,
do
yeah.
something like that. They have to go outside. You carry on with the lesson. They don't have to go anywhere, so you
Yeah.
can still take duty of care of them outside the room.
Yeah.
And then it's a chance for them to reset as
Yeah.
well if something's happening for them. Then you can step outside and have a chat to them
Yeah.
about what's happening,
Yeah.
lay out the expectations, and then if it wasn't truly a big deal, then you can just bring them back in.
Yeah.
Or if it's no, that's not then if you need to follow up, then you could send them to the office or something
Right.
like that,
Like if it's
which has
something
only ever happened. It has never happened at Kingsway, but
yeah.
I put kids out of the room at Kingsway, but only for relatively minor stuff. But I still think it's a line that steps outside of the standard warning move student sort of behavior management
Yeah, yeah. No, I like
continuum.
that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that one. The one you mentioned. Yeah, so then in terms of like you just sort of alluded to it just then, but like other sorts of behavior management, like
Mm.
if I don't know, let's say, well, anything else that doesn't fall into those two categories. Um, what's your process to deal with them? You said like warning, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
so what do you?
So I normally do an informal process where I don't normally do the name on the board thing.
Okay,
I
yeah,
just don't find it very for normal level stuff. I don't find it very functionally useful, and
yeah,
I also don't like it
yeah,
because I don't think putting a naughty kid's name on the board. I just don't think it's a good move.
yeah. It might be like a
Um,
badge of honor in some
yeah,
sense.
or
Yeah,
a badge of order, or even a badge of shame.
yeah, yeah,
If you are doing behavior management, there's aspects where behavior that they have does have a right amount of shame.
yeah,
If you have poor behavior, then you should feel a bit ashamed of what you've done.
yeah,
But at the same way, if you kick, if you make them feel, if you're forcing them through a shame process that is beyond what they're ready for, or
yeah,
even beyond what they deserve, and so if you were to, that's why a quiet chat outside the room where nobody else can hear
yeah,
is better than calling them out in front of the whole room
yeah,
if you can avoid that. So a quiet chat is almost always better
yeah,
because then you can maintain I'm in charge. I won't stand for this, but also I do care for you.
yeah,
You start calling him out in front of others, sort of thing. Sooner or later, you'll make an enemy of that kid in your life. Practically, your life gets harder, but then you lose any real ability to talk into that kid's life because they don't care anymore.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I would be warning.
yeah,
This is where I'd probably be more laid back. They'd get away with a bit more. But for example, I had some year 12s the end of the day on Friday where at a later point in the lesson, I made sure I only said it to them rather than out in front. I think I'm going to have to actually move you guys in the future. This isn't actually okay.
yeah, yeah,
Which is for them, they're oh, it's a bit of a contrast to the laid back feeling that they get. But at the
yeah,
same time, for their sake, it can't be allowed to continue. So in the next week, I'm probably going to make them sit separate,
Yeah.
where they love to sit next to each other. So that's a follow through. It's not.
Is it that like so you've told them that? Are you going to wait and see if they do anything more, or are you just going to straight up?
Yeah, so that's where I'm sitting. So I left it open.
Yeah. Okay.
So that I could go away and think about it.
Yeah.
But thinking about it afterwards, like I am, in some aspects, I'm too soft on the kids. So I went away and thought about it. I'm like, no, actually, like there's been more than one, like there's been a few times when I've been teaching and they've been talking and getting distracted and they would even admit to the same thing. I'll let him out.
Yeah.
So they would even, they admitted to do it. So I came around, I delivered my stuff so that they could be watching my lessons appear on their computer in front of them as well as the TV at the front. I deliver it digitally, so I write on a computer. It appears there. It could also appear in front of them. Anyway, I'm like, that's not what they're doing. I'm like, what are you doing on your computer actually? And you can see instantly like, oh yeah, it wasn't what I should have been doing. Like, so they've admitted that and they've done the other thing. And I think on this, that's where I'm like, okay, I will draw the line here and I'm going to move you. Because I think maintaining full teacher right over where they sit as well is also important for them to know that it's where you choose that they sit.
Yeah.
Not where they choose that they sit. And it's rare that I have to move kids during a class. But then if you can do it during a class, but often I'll go away, think about it, and then move them for future classes.
Right. Like,
and
man,
like,
tell them
on
at the beginning of the
reflection,
next
this wasn't
lesson.
a good move. I'm going to move you here. And it's all about speed. It's like you weren't always doing the right thing. I think this is going to help you out.
Yeah.
And then you can communicate home that their behaviour hasn't been the best, but you've got to move them to help them to learn, which means that home stays on side because you've put the move in a positive light. So, but all of that said, last year I had a class where a student was repeatedly class interrupting sort of thing. And so I needed to follow, like his name had to go on the board.
Right.
Then I had to give him a kind of like name, cross, move out of the room. Like I had to follow the process because he was in the system where he actually was on track to being asked to leave the school.
Right.
And so doing the process, documenting. Yeah. So then it's like I need to document this because
it needs to be really clear.
And he needs to be really clear. Like he's already clear, but everybody needs to be clear that I'm like, I've sent you to the office after you did this and then this and then this. And 3 times this week I've needed to write your name on the board.
Yeah.
So, but outside of that class, that's the first time I've written names on the board in many years.
Right.
Like it comes around every so often.
Yeah.
Very classroom dependent.
Yeah.
I also find that leaving names off the board leaves you the ability to communicate individually. And there are some times where a kid is just like louder than everybody else, or they've drawn your attention for some reason. And it's not always fair that they get like, it's not that you're picking on them. They're putting their hand up for discipline all the time themselves. But if the students start to get the impression that you're being both inconsistent or unfair, life gets real hard after that.
Yeah.
And so names on the board is a real dangerous point for that.
Yeah.
Because it slips into a like really legalistic interpretation of the rules now. They don't want to then see you as the referee who's making the wrong call. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. And then it's no tribunal. It's like, how much was like, let's watch the slow-mo replay. Like,
and that's even like, so that even with the sending them outside the class, it's like, I guess because they don't know what you said to them outside the class, their name's not on the board.
Yeah.
It's like you might not have said anything negative to them, just
Yeah.
like that. Like, next time, could you please?
Yeah,
Which
that's
is,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like that. Yeah.
So
okay.
it's for the others and for the student.
Yeah.
And sometimes just to separate, like on it, like half the time, the separation is enough
Yeah.
for that kid to get out of whatever momentary mindset that they're in, and then
Yeah.
you can have a normal conversation with them, and then you can just put them back in.
Yeah.
Almost always. And that so that kid who had his name on the board a number of times, that's where we were for like a term.
Mm.
But then as things escalated, it's like, okay, I don't want to, but this is the school's formal process. If they had a better one, I'd follow that, but this is the one they have. So
Yeah.
I have to use
Yeah.
the formal process.
Yeah.
But yeah, it rarely happens that you
Yeah.
have to do that in a school like Kingsway. Another school,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe it's your every
It
lesson.
varies,
Like
yeah,
it's your
yeah.
every lesson, but here, like, yeah, most of the rest can just be done through conversation and a good seating plan.
Yeah.
Where you-
Okay, so you do the seating plan, like
yeah, so lower school, I'd if there's going to be any aspect of behavior management, I'd seating plan them.
so
that
like
means-
you wouldn't by default seating plan every class.
No. So it
Okay.
depends on so year sevens, I had a low ability year seven. Actually, any year sevens, I'd
Yeah.
seating plan
Okay.
from the beginning.
Yeah. And
Assuming
just,
that
like,
I will
alphabetically
need
or
to.
something.
Yeah, I'd probably just like, yeah, if now that I know them kind of, or year sevens would be fresh, I'd just have to randomly choose.
Okay.
So like these two girls together, these two girls, these two boys, that sort of thing, and then
Yeah.
I'd get an understanding. As the classes get
Right, then
either,
you might do a new seating plan.
and then like new seating plan however often I want. 2
Would you-
weeks in,
would
we're
you
on a
then-
new seating plan. Let's move. Oh yeah, that one didn't work. We're on a new seating plan. Let's
Right,
go.
and then you do the whole thing, and
And I
avoids like just embarrassing or shaming anyone in particular too much necessarily.
Partly, like I would still, the problem, like the logistics of a classroom, that class that I'm speaking of had numerous learning need kids.
Yeah.
It had about 4 or so disruptive kids and a whole ton of like distracted kids.
Yeah.
And so if you, but at the same time, I like the opportunity for kids to work with mates or something.
Yeah.
So you might let those two loud kids sit near each other
Yeah.
for a time.
Yeah.
And be like, this isn't actually working. I'm going to have to separate you.
Yeah.
But the problem is the way you've constructed the rest of the room is that actually that kid over there who has the only spare seat near them, these two aren't going to get on
Yeah.
very well. Or
There's a
maybe,
lot of, like, balancing
this
all
kid
of the
is
factors.
too, yeah, this kid's too sensitive to have that kid near them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that kid's too distracted, or I can't have those two together.
Right.
You've got
So
to
a lot of
really,
it-
like it took a lot of thought.
Yeah.
So, and then they'd be like, then you'd find out that a kid's been bullied by another kid in another class.
Right.
You're like, okay, so now I need that kid to sit here with a little protected zone of nice kids around them.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, like,
And then,
there's a lot.
and
of
then
you,
so there's a lot of cards.
there's a lot of you just sort of understanding, like, in some sense, how it is that like different sort of personalities are going to interact. And
Yeah.
What that's going to
Yeah.
look like, and then just
Yeah.
like, okay. Like,
Yeah, and there's blind spots in every room as
Yeah.
well. Like the realistic nature is kids at the front on the side
Yeah.
are very like can also almost be invisible.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
they can get up to all sorts at
Yeah.
the front on the side, which is not what a lot of students realize.
Mm.
So having just straight off the bat, having kids that you can trust at the front on the
Yeah.
sides, kids at the back near the door, like you can use the full scope of the room to help them focus and not get distracted, which means that you can have better lessons.
Oh, like being like at the back in the corner.
So sometimes you would even put like, okay, these distracted ones or these
Yeah.
loud ones. So that's where I might seating plan a good class.
Is it because there's nowhere else for them to look?
It's just that they can't, like they'll resonate off other kids. You and me get on too well, and so if you're a desk separate from me, and then this other guy will all like get too excited. Like sometimes they're just loud. 'cause
Oh,
they're
like
too
being at the back in
excited,
the
but then
corner
they'll
makes them more
build.
isolated.
Yeah, so sometimes
okay.
you put them in the back with a couple of other kids who calming influence them,
Yeah, okay.
and then they can just. They're also at the back. They're more accessible to an EA. So if you've got a teacher's aide,
Right, yeah.
then putting them in the back is
That's also
actually a way
helpful.
to get them more help,
Yeah, yeah,
which is different if you don't have one. So
yeah.
there's all sorts, and
Lots
that's
of, yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So a high ability class, year tens, for example, I didn't seating plan them.
Mm.
I let them in. So class started, basically let them in after the first handful got there and told them they could sit wherever they wanted, which meant that some of my later students had to sit pretty close to the front.
Right.
Like it almost natively made a seating plan in that ones that I could trust were there early, they got to choose where they
Yeah,
would
yeah,
like. Great. Second level kids would take the night like the spots that they wanted.
yeah.
And then the last level of kids come in and say, okay, can you guys actually just come and sit here?
Yeah.
And boom, seating plan done because the ones who came last are also
Right.
most
So
distracted.
just I missed the first with the first lot of students, like the ones that arrived at the beginning.
Yeah.
You would ask them to sit in those
No,
ticket
no, you
spots, or
can
you
let them
just let
sit
them? Yeah.
wherever
Okay.
and
Right.
they'll often take their safe spot. So
Right.
that spot for example, the spot at the front against the wall
Yeah.
is a safe spot for a lot of kids. So
Oh.
they'll choose that. It's a little safe, quiet zone.
Right.
So
Interesting.
they'll choose to sit there and if they I found that consistently. If I teach in the same room,
Yeah.
the same kinds of kids will sit in the same kinds of
That is
spots.
very interesting.
Down to like the sister of the other, like you'll teach their sister.
Let's sit in the same
2 years
spot.
after, they will literally sit in exactly
Yeah.
the
Oh,
same
that's
spot without
fascinating.
ever having known that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like personality driven.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm big and loud. I want to see the whole room. Boom, they want to sit in the back.
Yeah.
Like I like the control. I like to be able to ask a question and be able to have a say. Like they want to sit there. These kids. So if you let them, so that's what I do with the knowledge that if it wasn't working, I'd just probably take groups and move them around
Yeah. Okay.
because that kind of high ability classes can be talking about the maths but being incredibly loud while they do so. And
Yeah.
so having rather than six kids all in like a
Yeah.
group of three, having them all of the loud kids in one group just
Yeah.
by taking these ones and moving them
Yeah.
and
Okay.
having a buffer zone of other
Yeah.
kids in the middle. And
And you
as
don't
long
need
as
to
you,
break them all up. You
yeah,
just
you
need to
can let
have a
them still
smaller
sit with
group.
their
Yeah. Yeah.
mates, but
Cool.
then they can talk to the person next to them.
Yeah.
And it's not okay to call across the room. And as long as you maintain that, it
Yeah.
actually makes the room quieter
Yeah.
because they can still have a chat about the
Yeah. Yeah.
work. They can still help each other,
Yeah.
but they can't. Like, but it doesn't just naturally build to 100 decibels just
Yeah.
as they work. Yeah. Mind if I pause
Great.
for a second? I'm just going to
Yeah.
go to the toilet. I'll
Of
be back.
course. Yeah. No worries.
Do you want one of these, by the way?
Yeah. Thank you.
You can work out which way this comes off. The other way to flop.
It's always the other way.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I wanted to ask about ethics next.
Yep.
So, like, what are some things that what are the main things maybe that you think a teacher has to be mindful of from an ethical perspective?
I think so. In your normal day to day, like there's aspects of it which are like legally big and legally small and not even in the legal world sort of thing. In terms of like, I do think it's ethical to treat kids with respect and to not kind of trigger into those things like shame and other stuff in ways that you don't have to and in ways that are unkind. And that's like a certain, like, I think ethically that way of operating, and then not just with kids, but with other teachers and stuff. Like, I do think that's really important. And that's kind of the ground level ethical sort of how do you behave morally in that sort of context, and even things like trying not to lose your temper and being willing to apologize if you get it wrong, sort of thing. Then in a bigger sense, I think there's how do you interact with other staff and parents and students in a way that is like professionally and ethically like required as well. So for example, it's about setting, like, I guess, appropriate professional boundaries, both with others, I guess, colleagues, and how you speak to them, how you work with them, how you respect them, and like times where that breaks down, that can have a huge impact on just the morale and the working of schools, where teachers are unkind to each other, or where bullying can start to come in, like where they start to. So ethically, for a teacher to be talking to kids about another teacher, like that is a thing that like is unfortunately quite common,
Right.
in a way, not just like how's Mrs. Smith, isn't she great, sort of thing, or how's your class going, more like, oh yeah, can you believe they did like this? That sort of thing, and that can be huge. So I think that's a big one, like that professional boundary there. And then there's of course, like other professional boundaries in terms of like being alone with students, and appropriate like boundaries on even communication and availability, sort of thing. So like, and depending on year group, like a student might send me like an email about needing some help with a year 12 maths question. And sometimes, like if I'm working outside of hours, sometimes I might reply to that depending on when the test is and anything else. Sometimes I might reply to that. But depending on the kid, like I'd have to, that's like sometimes a judgment call, and you are making sure you do it on the school system.
Yeah.
But then you're also like going, actually, this kid is like too attached or to something else. And so ethically, you do have to be very aware of those sorts of things as well, that you're not building
like too much familiarity.
too much. Yeah. Like you can be friendly, but it's an important distinctive that you're not their mate. Sort of thing. Which just is like it's not a professional place to be, and that can be a trap for the pastorally inclined teacher as well. Like sometimes that line of like, how much can I help them appropriately, So, um, yeah, I don't like if that makes sense. And then
Absolutely, yeah.
so, but that's often a like that's a ways to combat that is like to work um openly with like heads of department and other staff and
Yeah,
things
like
like that. So times
transparency
where
and
that, yeah, the transparency. And so,
yeah,
for example, if we've got a student who appears to be like um, approaching a particular teacher too much at like in the maths department, maybe they just only want to take help from that one teacher and they just want to come to tutoring, which is open to all students, but they want to seek that teacher. Then you
right.
would switch into like you would help them to also maintain those boundaries.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you'd stick around or you'd help them.
Yeah,
Yeah, like yeah. Um, I guess operating ethically with parents is then even like again that those communication channels and how and when do you reply to emails can even be like setting up appropriate professional boundaries,
right.
which is helpful for them and for you as well.
Do you
So,
find you've often gotten emails from parents?
oh yeah, parents will email at all sorts of times about all sorts of things.
And then,
And
yeah,
like,
how do you usually
and
respond
so
then?
like an expectation would be so they, and then they can be, sometimes can be even quite combative sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, and then again, like this, like it would depend on the parent and the time, but our school has a automatic reply set up. So if a parent emails after like 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
they get an automatic reply saying, this is after hours, don't expect a reply,
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of thing. And so, um, but the teaching can like, and email, like the very nature of emails, because they're so instant, that makes teachers sometimes feel like they should reply. But
Right,
it
yeah.
cannot be a professionally useful thing to
Yeah.
reply to a parent at 8 o'clock at night. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just not a, it's a level of access that shouldn't be
Yeah, yeah.
encouraged. And so I would even just doing things like delay delivery in
Yeah,
Outlook.
yeah.
You write your email in Outlook and you say delay delivery until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
which means that you've written it if that's easier to do now,
Yeah.
and then the email goes
Yeah,
through
yeah.
during work hours because yeah, it's a
It's
slippery
more appropriate.
slope into
Yeah, you're opening it up for
teachers. I mean, yeah, parents emailing you at all hours, and then teachers get themselves into trouble, and like where then maybe a parent's even got a phone number, and then they're texting,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then it breeds like it's a level of familiarity that just is not um, ethically helpful and
Yeah.
appropriate for anyone. And then it often from there can spiral off into like I said, like recruiting students towards a cause against another teacher. Maybe they're
Right.
recruiting parents to like it just is. It stops the school functioning as professionally as the school
Yeah.
should. So there's a right moral way to interact with people, and then as you go off on the continuum obvious of ethical behavior that shouldn't happen. Often, I think that middle level, seemingly low, or even seemingly low level familiarity, like even with the timing of emails, can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And schools that set clear boundaries on teachers can also help them maintain longevity. So if you get
Yeah,
an
yeah.
email from a parent, you should not reply after
Yeah,
this
yeah.
time. And that can be like really um, good information for a new teacher to hear who
Yeah.
in every other way is hearing, do your job, do it really, really well.
Yeah.
And they think that doing their job really well is being accessible to parents at any
Yeah.
time of the day.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about legal requirements? Is there obviously that related to ethical requirements, but
Mm.
like in terms of things that you the teachers have to have in mind?
Yep.
What
Yep.
are the most important legal requirements that you'd
I
say?
guess it's the big one is the child safe
Hmm.
stuff, probably. And there's ongoing training for that continually for teachers.
Hmm.
on the child safe stuff, and that's probably legally. That's the big one. That's the big one that I think most people would think about straight away, and even organisations like Scripture Union, like the child safe thing is huge. And then obviously, like legally, you do have in some areas. So, for example, in D&T or science, you've got legal responsibility to operate your pracs in a safe way, to do the paperwork, to risk assess, and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's almost a little neat. That stuff doesn't really come up in maths.
Right. Yeah.
The stuff we use is not needing a risk assessment.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that kind of legality, but I think the child safe sort of stuff about boundaries and mandatory reporting and stuff like that is the thing that needs to be, that it would
It's
probably
really important to
more
know.
commonly be coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what uh in addition to teaching, you touched a bit on this before, like when we were
Mm.
having lunch. Um, in addition to teaching, what other jobs do you have to do? So
Mm.
like administrative or
Yeah,
organizational
yeah, yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah.
basically.
Yeah, so you have things like communicating with parents, writing reports or comments, doing marking. So it's about feedback to both the students and parents. It's about like looking at student plans and fulfilling requirements where you need to um, be recording. For example, if a kid needs extra time on an assessment, you got to record the extra time. So there's student learning differences.
Yeah.
Um, so you're doing that, and not only that, but then at the start of the year, you'll have to review their learning plan and sign off that you've read it and things like that.
Yep.
Um, it can be things like um, recording data, I guess marks and things like that.
Yeah.
And depending on systems, that can take a long time or a short time.
Right.
Um, there's obviously the meeting and the PD that is required to
Yeah.
different levels. Um, what else would in a normal teacher's day? Oh, there's probably behavior management follow up, which can be quite,
Right.
so that can be a um, slippery slope of hard times for a teacher. If they got some hard classes, they'll have to do more of that. And
Paperwork, you
yeah,
mean? Yeah.
paperworky sort of stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like asked this kid to step outside my room, but it now needs to be written onto the system, and now I need to
Right.
talk to a parent. Now I need to do something else.
Yeah.
Um, Parent
Do you
teacher
need to
in.
talk to a parent every time you ask a kid to step out the room, or
It
is this
depends on the thing. Like,
right?
so for example, that kid who's in danger and needs to be followed through as in danger of getting in lots of trouble,
Yeah.
he
He
needs to
needs
be
you to.
followed
Yep.
through the system. If it was so that class required a lot of communication with
Yeah.
parents. Your kid has needed to be talked to a bunch of times. So then, if that facilitates the next step in the process of the discipline process to continue.
Yeah. With the ones where it's just like, okay, well, it's just a one time. I'm asking him to step out of the class. Would you even worry about
I
the
probably
paperwork?
don't even record it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's a one thing uncharacteristic,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
They're more likely to get an email home if they're consistently off task or if they're distracting others.
Yeah.
Then I let it like it's a learning thing and the
Yeah.
parents want to know.
Yeah.
Um,
Would you like? Would you let the student know, like a sort of a warning, like I'm gonna have to tell your parents about this,
oh
or is
yeah,
this
I
like,
always tell a kid that I'm going to contact their parents if I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah,
contact their
yeah,
parents. It almost comes in at the last level of warning. So this behaviour is really concerning me. You are not learning
yeah,
how I need like in the way that you should be in this room.
yeah,
I think I'm going to need to talk to your parents about this,
right,
and then depending on their reaction, can
right.
like so
You
if
you
that
might you
like
might say,
scared like if
yeah, you
for
might say,
example
okay, well, like,
yeah they're like
yeah,
no please don't do that. I promise I'm
yeah,
like well let's
give
give
him
it a
another
shot.
chance. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
give it a
Okay,
shot then.
I
Yeah, no
like that.
problems. Or if they're like okay, then you just follow through and do it. Like because some kids yeah, talking to parents will get some kids like, I don't know. Unfortunately, sometimes that might get them literally beaten at home.
Yeah.
Other times, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Most of the time, hopefully, it's just the parents need to know and they can all be informed.
Yeah.
But you can normally read what sort of circumstance a kid
Yeah.
is, not only by their behaviour in that moment, but in other moments,
Yeah.
whether or not you want to try to do more with them. But there is a point where, yeah, parents need to know.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, come in, and it always helps to go in earlier than you would think because you can come in with a email saying they are not always paying attention. They are sometimes doing the wrong thing, which is much easier email to write and receive than a this kid never does the right thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's like we're in week 10 and you're telling me now that they never do
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
right thing. This is the wrong time to be
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
me this. And that would be fair. The
Yeah.
parent should be rightfully upset
Yeah.
if that's like if they're getting an email like that and it's been behavior ongoing for a long time.
Yeah. Um, what about lunch duty? Like, what's anything?
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
that's just part and parcel. Yeah. So we have what, 3 20-minute duties in a week.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I forgot about that. That's a responsibility.
Mm.
Mm. Um, yeah, and then if you do anything else on top of that, yeah, then obviously you've got to everything, every other bit and piece around the thing. Like, so you might do. Um, our school comes with a requirement on the EBA sort of thing for teachers to do 40 hours a year of extra stuff, like
Okay.
extracurricular sort of thing. So they
Okay.
might take a sport team.
Right.
They might work might help run the drama production. They
Yeah.
might do some like a board game club. So they've got to do something outside for even a set amount of hours
Okay.
for a year, which is not like very harshly monitored, but it is like encouraged and Hollis are meant to follow up on it,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Okay.
So there's, yeah, those sorts of actual responsibilities too.
Um, in terms of professional development,
Mm-hmm.
obviously you would have done quite a bit of that over the years.
Yeah.
Is there any one or maybe a few like particular ones that stand out to you as being like particularly valuable?
Mm. Um, yeah, I think ones which like give you a takeaway of a new perspective on things can be the best. Like, so if it's just a functional, here's how to use the computer system,
Mm.
who cares? No, you learn how to use it and great. But I do remember like a couple of behavior sort of ones. So I saw one on trauma. And we even had like images of brain scans. Like this is a kid who experienced trauma as a kid. This is a brain scan of them. This is a normal kid's brain scan. Have a look at how like noticeably different they are.
Yeah.
And so then when working with a kid in a room, if they've undergone trauma, like so like how can you expect them to behave the same as this other kid? Like
Yeah.
that is not like what you thought were equal expectations and not
Yeah.
actually equal in requirement for
Yeah.
that. It's equal in what you want them to do, but it's not equal in how hard it is for those two
Yeah.
kids to
Yeah.
achieve that. That was a bit of a opening kind of mind thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And then I've seen others. So we did recently, or a couple of years ago, a restorative practice PD,
Mm.
and that helped me to think about shame, I guess, more than previously. It was a lot of stuff which I'm like, oh yeah, this is just stuff that you normally do.
Mm.
But there was a lot on about like this idea of shame response, and when a kid is truly feeling that, they actually can't correct a lot of the behaviors or even take
Yeah.
positive feedback or negative feedback. Like they can't, they're in a loop. So the idea of that and how do you chat and restore relationships was the
Mm.
side point. But I think that, so again, that was a little snippet.
Yeah.
every so often you do like a personality style thing. You're like, oh yeah, that opens up a bit more
Yeah, okay.
perspective. What else? Not much. There's a whole lot of wasted time or a whole lot of other
The time.
information download once.
Wasted. Oh,
Well, as
wasted
in
time. Wasted
wasted
time.
time.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, what
yeah,
have you?
yeah, yeah,
You've ticked a box here, or it's
yeah,
like, let's all, yeah. So there's a lot of times where you're like, this is truly wasting my time. But
yeah,
there's occasionally, and the ones that really stick are the ones who give you a new perspective on things.
yeah,
Because I think a lot of teaching, that's one, like a lot of teaching just kind of happens and like you end up immersed in it. And that's where prac is useful because you just got to be immersed in it. And then you gather things and you put them all in your tool belt and you use them all, but at the same time. It's not like you're choosing one thing, then another thing, like
yeah.
you're not behavior managing and then not behavior managing and then doing something else. You're doing like
Yeah, you have to.
everything all at once.
Yeah,
Like it's more of the vibe than anything else, but it's not
yeah,
truly the vibe. Like many teachers will just get out there and do it and won't even truly realize all of the skills that they're using
yeah,
to do it. So then it can be even hard to explain what you do. But so then the PD that helps you open up like more aspects or like and build into that, I think is the most valuable. So that's why. So for example, having an idea of how kids' response to shame,
mm,
having an idea of kids' personalities in a classroom can let you put together a seating plan, can see that that kid's winding up
yeah,
before they even get there and can tell them to go get a drink. And that means that you haven't even needed to discipline them, which is the trajectory that they were
Sorry, t tell them
going
to go
on.
get a drink.
So you might go, oh, why don't you just go get a drink? Go for a walk.
Oh, okay.
And then they go for a walk. And the like
Is it the
they're on
kind
a
of like,
pathway because you can like the experience will like you look around and if you have enough situational awareness, which again is an experience thing, you can be like that kid's really unsettled today or
yeah,
they're off today and they're
yeah.
not having a good day. Then
Would you like you go one on one and like sort of say to them like,
well,
or
sometimes, like particularly, so some kids will, it might even be a thing that I've chatted to them about, or while they're outside the room.
yeah,
So Um, so maybe that kid's needed to be sent out at another time. But you'd like, tell you what, how about we do this? If you're starting to get amped up or something, I'll tell you to go get a drink. And that's code for just do a lap of the block. Like go out, go for a walk. As long as you are less than 2 minutes, I don't mind.
yeah,
Go take a walk, come on back. Get a
yeah,
drink if you want to.
yeah,
Go to the toilet if you want to. But
yeah,
then you can come back in. We'll keep going.
yeah,
And so then you can so a lot of it like becomes putting out like not even putting out spot fires. It's like spotting,
preventing.
like
Yeah, yeah,
preventing the spark even happening if you
yeah,
can. But when they do, like taking away the heat source, the fuel
yeah,
source,
yeah,
like all of that, and then the more that you understand that, the easier it can be. And like I mentioned before, like when you lose your temper, you've lost the game. Like that's
yeah,
like nobody's winning then. But if you understand where it can coming from, that's actually a practical tool as
yeah,
opposed to don't be mad, don't be mad, don't be mad, which
yeah,
might need to be done sometimes.
yeah,
But you're like, oh, you kind of get where these kids are coming from. Well, stuff's hard for them.
yeah.
So um, the more of that sort of stuff is the better. Like,
I'm struggling just to picture like how that go get a drink interaction looks like. They get like you sort of explaining it to them in the first place, but then it's like okay, like in the middle of class, like
oh,
once
like
you
it might literally be. So I'm trying to teach.
yeah
So I'm trying to teach from the front, and this kid just says like a dumb thing,
yeah
like literally just a dumb thing to get laughs or
yeah
something. Be like, come on, let's pay attention. Um, it helps me to stay on track with where I am if you like, if you can show me that you're listening. Thanks. So like, so you can even the way that you phrase it
yeah
can be less don't do that thing, it can be like, it helps me when you pay attention if you can look at me at the front while
Right.
I'm talking, then that will help me and make it more about you. But then if they go and do it again,
Yeah.
why don't you just go for it? Grab a quick drink or
Yeah.
something.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, then that is like, so primarily at that time where you need to have the attention of the class
Yeah.
or something like that, that can help them. It's almost like a pre-send out. Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you know that that's like any minute now they're going to do something really silly.
Yeah.
Um, then
Diffuses
the
it.
bit of a walk, like you're
Yeah.
just diffusing it in
Yeah.
any way that you can. And sometimes the seating plan is not enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, or
Yeah.
you've messed up your seating plan and that kid's actually near another kid. You need to do something
Yeah.
else. And so the walk to get a drink is a fairly useful one at a school where they don't get up to too much in a couple of minutes. It's not
Yeah.
big. We do let them go for a drink. So it's
Yeah.
not even that abnormal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what they like. Kids will self do it. Like, that's the thing. They'll be like, I've had enough of this lesson. Can I go get a drink?
Yeah.
It's like, cool.
Yeah.
Go for a quick walk, whatever.
Yeah.
Depends on the timing. You might be like, no, not right now. Ask me
Yeah.
again in 5 minutes,
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of thing. And then they don't get to go for a drink just because they saw their mate outside the room and they want to join
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask about technology. So, um, I guess the the overarching question is how have you integrated technology into your teaching? But
Yep.
one factor that I'm particularly curious about is what is the laptops in particular.
Mm.
So all the students, it's one-to-one laptops.
Yeah, every kid at school's got a device.
Yeah.
I do. So I present my lessons in OneNote
Yeah.
through a screen send Vivi program.
Oh, okay.
So I've got my Microsoft Surface device with a pen.
Mm.
I'll prepare my lesson, which I will normally also print. So they're getting, it's not a PowerPoint, but it might be like a style thing where it's all of the information. It might be gaps where they could write, or gaps for examples,
Yeah.
key pictures, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or information, depends on the year group and how much you want them to write or not.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll prepare that, print it, give them a paper copy, and then I will work from the front on the screen, writing on my laptop, which then there's spots for them to fill in and play along.
Oh, okay.
So they'll write on the paper what I've got on the screen. If you
Yeah. So basically, in OneNote, you've got, and it might be, let's say, one class, it might be a series of worksheets.
Yeah.
But it's all in one document because it's on the OneNote, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. I could show you. It might be useful just to show later as well. But like,
yeah.
so I'll have each lesson will get a different note
Yes.
within the content library. So
Yeah.
it'd be like, depending on the year group, depends on how I structure those. So each lesson is a separate note.
Yeah.
I'll prepare that at home
Yeah.
with the knowing that I'll print it, give it to them,
Yeah.
and then they can take a limited amount of notes while I'm talking. Because I think
Yeah.
some note taking pen on paper is useful.
Yeah.
Some kids love it. Some kids hate it and do a medium level.
Yeah.
So they get a bit of
Not
both.
too much. Yeah.
And particularly in maths, it's easy to have the question already written. So they're not wasting time writing a question, particularly at a lower year where they're low ability, low writing skills. It's going to take them longer than you want them to do the question for, just to write the question.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I have it printed for them, and then they can do that.
Will it be just like one sheet each class, or like?
It might even be like here you go, year 12s. This is 2 A4 pages back and front all stapled together, and they have to work through that.
Okay,
yeah. And then so each class I'll give out one of them. I don't give out like a book for the week or anything.
Yeah.
And then then they can also access that at home.
Yep.
Or they could access it in the room, like literally right then and there, because OneNote updates very frequently.
Yeah.
So normally I require them to be writing. Some kids, depends on the kid, I'll allow them to have their computer screen up and they can have it. So they can also have, I've got a big screen TV at the front of the room, which is my board.
Yeah.
they can have a computer open in front of them
Yeah.
with my OneNote. Like it's basically the front screen on their
Yeah.
laptop. But it depends on the year group and how much you can trust them
Yeah.
to be paying attention.
So for the
Particularly
most
during
part,
instruction,
yeah.
nearly all kids, I want that computer closed
Yeah.
in
Okay.
front of them
Yeah.
while I'm instructing.
Yeah.
While they're working, depends on the year group and their ability level.
Yeah.
High ability kids can work off a question set which is on the computer. Lower ability groups need paper to trigger the I have paper, I have work to do.
Yeah.
So it depends on their almost their self motivation.
Yeah.
So my top year 10s, I can have the question set that I've just snipped from a textbook also in the OneNote.
Yeah.
And they can pull it up on the screen. They can work their way down just on their paper, working through the questions. And then I've also managed to put the answers in it as well. So if they need their answer, they can just flick it to the side, check their answer, okay, flick it back, keep on going. Can be a functional, a really useful way to go. But that only works with motivated students.
Yeah.
Less motivated students need a sheet of paper in front of them. Even
Yeah.
if I might even just print those questions.
Yeah.
So here are the questions, do them in your book.
Yeah.
And because the screen is enough to send them off.
Yeah.
But I've also got other students who operate, they'll bring their own Surface or iPad and they will do those questions on their computer, which I'm okay with if they are able to function with the computer as a tool that we want it to actively be in that circumstance. If they can do that without playing a game or getting distracted or online shopping or whatever, would trap and send them in a different direction.
So
let them do whatever.
So do you like walk around and like look and see what they're looking at and monitor, or like you see like
yeah. So if they're in a working environment where I'm not up the front needing to talk, you can walk around and see what they're going and keep them accountable. If I am teaching, it's pretty easy to tell whether they're paying attention to you or paying attention to their screen or playing a computer game. Which is not only attention to the screen, but the keys on the fingers on the arrow keys. It's like I don't even need to look at your screen. I don't need a screen viewer to know that you're playing a game right now. Take your hands off the computer. Which is why I tell most kids to just like at least hold them to tilting the screen to 45 if I need their attention for a little bit of time. That is, take it from like this, tilt it down like this so that it's not in their line of sight. If it's going to be a quick interruption, if it's going to be a long interruption, I'll tell them, no, everybody close your computer. I want your eyes on me so that I can teach you this.
And you tell the whole class, like just tilt your
and then
just tilt your laptops down for a second.
That's right. Yeah, and so it depends on the group. We will also in maths, we've got an online software which practically, like you might even give a lesson where they're working on questions on that. And so then they're actively doing, like the whole point is to work on the computer or device for the lesson. So it's a bit of a mix. I do heavy use the tech, but only like practically they're doing work on paper. Most of them are doing work on paper. And we take the distraction out of the thing, especially if they're not able to handle it. And then the only other thing that I do with tech is I will have if a kid is away, I normally don't bother if everybody's there, but if a kid's away, I'll probably use my iPad to record the lesson. Just kind of like this, set it up, press record, teach the lesson, stop it recording, and then I'll put the file into SharePoint and share a link. So it works just like YouTube, basically. I click on the link in my OneNote. At the top of the page, it says video. So if they've been away, they can see not only what I've given out, but what I've written, and they can click on the video and they can watch me do it within the class. Which some students at like year 11 and 12, they might even watch it back even if they were there. To try to work out what's going on. They could have found better YouTube than me, but often they're less like they don't have the mindset to do that. So they just click on the link that I gave them. They can watch part of the lesson again. So I like it, but with the cat, I still burn a lot of trees. We still print. I still print a lot of notes for kids. And some of them keep them as precious documents. And Others throw it
Let's
in the
go in the
bin
bin.
straight
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
But I don't mind
Because it does its
too
job in the
much, as long as
class.
it does its job in the
Yeah,
class, and then the rest is their responsibility as we
yeah,
build them up from there.
yeah. Cool. What about do you think AI stuff like ChatGPT, has that
Mm.
affected you in the
Not in
classroom at
maths,
all?
no. Um, Chat GPT is just, it's like actually not very good at maths
Yeah,
as well. Like it will tell you the wrong answer if you give it a medium level question. You don't even
right,
need to go outside the scope of year 11 and 12 to get beyond its ability to do maths.
right.
So errors will come up. I do think
Yeah,
in the future, very much yes. I think you would be able to go onto a thing like ChatGPT and say, I would like a worksheet on this. I want 20 questions. I want it to be at this difficulty level, even like this curriculum point of the SWA curriculum. I
yeah,
want it as a PDF, go. And it
yeah,
would do that.
yeah.
At the moment, you can ask it to give you 10 questions on something, and it will.
But they might not be right. You might have
And they might,
to change
yeah,
it.
at a high level, they're possibly not right.
Yeah,
At a, um, and you might have to, and it won't be formatted nicely. Off, it's just
yeah,
easier
yeah,
to make them up, easier and faster. But I
yeah,
do think in the future, in the maths world, that will become a function.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's like it's a language model, not a maths model.
yeah,
So as soon as they integrate those two things, when they make some beautiful harmony of Wolfram Alpha and
yeah,
AI, then the world in that regard will change. It'll all of a sudden be
yeah,
able to put out useful stuff. Um, in outside of class, I've used ChatGPT to tidy up language of like a report comment or something,
yeah,
especially when there's nothing truly identifying about the kid other than what kind of kid they are, what stuff they struggle in. Like
yeah,
there's nothing and a first name. So I will write a rough comment and throw it into ChatGPT and say, can you formalize my language, British
yeah,
English, check my grammar,
yeah,
and it'll not write it again, but just it'll grammar check me.
yeah,
And then I copy paste that into my
yeah,
reports. So I've functionally used it for reports
yeah.
and found it a useful tool
Hmm.
for that. And I think it will become more useful in the future as it obviously becomes better.
Yeah,
Um, and it's arguable about doing much more with it than that often comes at a greater cost to time than to benefit. So
yeah,
that's as far as I've got.
right. Um, the in terms of today, and I
Mm.
guess you can speak from your experience probably a lot with this. What do you think? Um, are there any? What are the main ways that you think the teaching context today has like shaped or changed education? So like the let's say changes within the last 10 years,
Oh
the last
yeah,
20
like
years. What's
changes to teaching in the last however many
to
years, sort of thing.
teaching, to the culture? Like
Yeah,
what are the things that have most,
yeah,
let's say,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
shifted,
Um,
and how have they had an
yeah,
impact?
I think in regards to the actual teaching and how you interact with students and stuff, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
And I think, like, even the technology and everything else, the battles that you fight are still the same battles. Um, and the battles of self confidence within kids and all of that. Like, it's exactly the same.
Mm.
But the nature of it can change. I do think um, there's little things like the use of screens
Yeah.
for kids. Like that that has an effect on them and their behavior with each other and their interactions. Like it's a different connected world to
Yeah.
um, probably go back 20 years and you didn't have a kid with a personal screen,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Um, and a phone. That wouldn't have been a thing for many kids in '04, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit further back than that. But
Yeah.
so that has changed the nature, but I don't think it's almost how those same problems exhibit
Right. They look a bit
themselves.
different, but it's the same
Yeah, yeah,
underlying
that's
thing.
right. Maybe people would argue that students are getting more anxious and things like that,
Mm.
and they're possibly all tied up into each other.
Yeah.
The digital world. My jury's out on that one. I think it does feel like you're seeing more kids with learning needs and like autism spectrum sort of things.
Mm.
Feels like that's a bit more, but I'm not sure if that's even true or whether we're just diagnosing more.
Right.
Like, so there is more in terms of the requirement on a teacher. There's now a more administrative requirements to
Yeah.
do like learning plans and stuff like
Yeah.
that. There's more of a child safe focus and more of a focus on those, particularly the kid safe ethical boundaries. There's more of a focus on that than 20 years ago, maybe not 10
Mm.
years ago was about when it's all being pushed through. Um, but the true reality of the game, especially because it's such a social and dynamic situation, like it requires, like it's on, it's all about the people, I think.
Mm.
And so that's the bigger part of it. And that
Yeah.
hasn't
That just,
truly
yeah.
changed. That hasn't truly changed at all, I don't
Yeah.
think. You'd be nice to kids and you look after them and you try to help them build a bit of self-belief and enjoyment, regardless of whether or not they're doing great at the particular time and they're like academically great. If they can start to enjoy it, then that's the biggest challenge, which was the biggest challenge 20 years ago and was probably the biggest challenge a lot of time ago, but that's outside of my experience. I don't know
Yeah.
whether teachers 50 years ago would have said that. It seems like if you read just about teaching back then, you'd think not, but I don't. I think individually teachers will have been doing the same thing for,
Yeah.
like the good ones will have been doing the same thing forever. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think my final question is, as a pre-service teacher, what
Mm.
advice would you offer for me into just transitioning into teaching and navigating challenges in the classroom? Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
anything in particular that you think
Yeah.
stands out as being something that I should?
Mm. I think so. Realizing that you are like almost cheerleading a little bit, even at high school. It changes depending on obviously how you teach a class at primary school to high school, but I think bringing enthusiasm across
Mm.
is really important. Um, and kind of almost a confidence is key,
Mm.
and it's okay to fake it till you make it in that regard as well. Like where you're stepping into a position where so you're the boss of the room, and
Mm.
what you say goes, sort of thing. And that that's a mindset that can sets up for success because people feel that like if
Mm.
you are like I'm confident I can do a good job, even if sometimes you like even if you got the little niggle of like, oh, can I do this?
Mm.
Like even with like the mentor teachers and in departments, you're like, no, we've got this. Or this confidence can come through. Then that's where opportunities start to appear. Like you get opportunities to teach classes that maybe if you're looking a little bit lack of confident, they won't even give you a
Right.
shot
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
So it's about so what do I do? That was class related. Let's try to go clarify and tidy up in terms of operating as a teacher.
Yeah.
Being confident with your mentor teacher and prepared and showing that you can converse at an adult level.
Yeah.
And that you're up for like stepping up to being a professional. That's big.
Yeah.
That will lead to opportunities and also so being willing to read the room, and if they're like, okay, they're giving me some scope to step out on my own on this one, here we go. Like, be bold enough to give something a go. Like, if you're like, actually, I'd like to see a lower school class. Do you mind if I go speak to those other teachers and see if anybody's happy for me to do that?
Yeah.
That would be like, that's a good sign amongst a teacher operating professionally amongst teachers.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. And then for classes, I think if you do like the focus on like introduction to the lesson, which can involve how are you gonna get the lesson started? Like, do you start with questions? Do you start with whatever you do? It's both about getting them on task early and on encouraging them on why it's important to learn this.
Yeah.
In a science, sometimes it's like a body of content, and just by teaching it with enthusiasm, you can tick that off through the lesson. In maths, we might be like, we're learning about quadratics.
Yeah.
And quadratics are real good. It's like they're a real good challenge. They're going to be one of the harder things you've done, but by the end of today, you're going to be much better at maths, and they do build into maths, like into future years.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to lay some great groundwork today. You can do it. We can do it. Let's go do it. Like it's that, I believe in you. Let's go do it together.
Yeah.
And if you can, that's the forgotten bit of a lesson plan. Too much focus on a lesson plan forgets the importance of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Welcoming them at the door, looking for opportunities to say good day to them in the yard, like doing yard duty with your mentor.
Welcoming at the door, like you'd say hi to each student.
Yeah, like you could. So if you have the scope, so for example, if you've had the room in advance, like sometimes you'll get into the room as they get into the room, and then you might even just take a moment to have a chat to the line.
Yeah.
How you guys going today? What did you just have? Was it any good? What did you learn? Like what are you doing on the weekend?
Yeah.
What have you been doing at lunch? Sort of, or like whatever, like just some sort of connection thing.
Yeah.
And that's when you show up at the door, and then you can just like, you got to practically get set up in the room, but you can chuck them in. And then I'd start with a couple of starter questions often on a bit of paper or on the screen so that they can get working while I do the role. So they're being productive early.
Yeah.
And that's a game changer. Like, so game changer, one, show them that you're interested and say hello at the door. And if you're there before them, you can even go out to the door and be chatting as they show up rather than at the computer freaking out about the lesson or something. Like, and the preparation helps with that. Not always possible, but if it is.
Yeah.
So then as you teach them, then going into the lesson being the boss, I mean, like, no, you are paying attention to me when I talk. Like, that one is worth investing however much, like, thought before and after every lesson into, like, when I talk, you're not talking.
Yeah.
But you don't have to word it like that. It can be useful cues, like, okay, everybody paying attention as you're stopping what you're doing, and then you give them time.
Yeah.
To sort themselves out by saying intermediate things. As you're stopping what you're doing and turning your eyes towards me, which shows me that you're paying attention. Okay, guys, let's just, and then by then you've got almost everybody like, sorry guys, you're gonna have to finish that conversation later, and everybody eyes on me.
Yeah.
And then you're away. Like, by investing the time to achieve that, that is probably, like, doing that from the beginning is really big on the rest of the behavior management stuff. So I guess those two things, they're my non-negotiables. They're my number. They're
Yeah.
like for my practice. That's
Yeah.
what I tell them they should do.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see you start them well, and if I don't want them talking over you, make sure you hold them to account on that.
Yeah.
And then, like, beyond that, if they do something wrong, I want to see you act
Yeah.
on it. Like, be assertive and go, that behavior is not okay. Like, I need to send notice stuff and do
Yeah.
stuff. And it's all about having a go. Like, even
Yeah.
if it's like, just step outside for a second and have a chat to you, and then we can keep moving or something.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I saw something, but I'm a bit scared to take the bull by the horns.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to do anything about that.
Yeah.
That's. And anything else, just give us a call if you want more.
Yeah.
And I think they're the ones that get teachers started, and then you can be like, how am I going to effectively teach this? And that requires a lot of reflection. But that's the big and obvious one. They spend all of their time at uni talking about pedagogy. How is however they do it nowadays, surely it's about the same as when I went through. We're going to learn about this style of learning. So yeah, use all of the tools that you've got. So there you go.
Great. That was. I really like that. That was. I've got plenty. Oh, went nearly an hour and a half. Sorry, that went a bit long.
That's all right. I never